Hello, everyone. This is Tamra Fleming from upswingu.com, and we are here with Monique Rebelle, who is an amazing person. This is an expert interview, and she is the author of a book we're going to talk about, which is Transcendence Calling. She has an absolutely amazing story, and you'll learn a lot as you go through listening to Monique explain about her journey. So let me just start with a little bit about Monique. She is an amazing individual. She was born in Warsaw, Poland, to a family of actors, and she left Poland on her own as a teenager, beginning her starving artist existence in London, and then she moved to Amsterdam. So for about a year, she also lived and worked in Paris. Her paintings, which you can see some of her work behind her, I can see that in the video, her paintings from those years were done in a neo-expressionistic style. She participated in numerous art shows in the Netherlands, and one of her paintings was purchased by the Royal Dutch Collection. Very fun. After moving to the United States and settling in Los Angeles, an epiphany experienced in 1998 and made her art shift into a new direction. Classified by LA art critic Peter Frank and neo-constructionist, sorry about that, in 1992, she experienced an even more profound, life-changing occurrence. Her recent book, Transcendence Calling, describes the experience and its results. She subsequently moved to Maui for 2 years and then to the Virginia foothills near Reno, Nevada, where she now lives and works today, painting in non-objective and sometimes figurative styles. Monique is an avid skier and inventor of a patented device for skiers and hikers. She has a grown-up daughter who lives in Poland. Wow. Welcome, Monique. Now, I was just going to say, Monique and I met when I was writing Upswing book, the Upswing book last year, and we became kind of kindred spirits in the authoring world and have supported each other on the journey. And so this interview is to give you an inside view of her world, which is absolutely amazing, and for her to share a lot of what's in the book. I've read the book. The book is amazing. And it's in 3 parts, which is what Monique is going to go through on this interview, which is the story behind how the book got written, the experience of what she went through, and then how to actually do some of the things that she did to create a higher enlightened spiritual state. So welcome, Monique.
Thank you. Thank you, Tamra.
It's really great.
I'm excited to be able to share this with you. The book came about probably 2013. I have a friend who I haven't seen for many, many years. We met in Amsterdam years ago, and she was also from Poland. And she was the one who found out after 20-something years that we both were interested in spirituality. And then I told her about my experience a little bit, and she said, "Oh, you have to write a book." And I had that in mind. I had in mind to write it because there are many reasons why. Most important reason was that the experience that I had was spontaneous, but I realized that there was so much in my experience that sharing it with others will be helpful. So let's go back to the times when I was growing up in Poland. I write about my life there, and I write about my life after I left Poland. My parents were actors, but I wasn't allowed to do acting. I didn't have a very good relationship with my mother, and I didn't know my father. When I was 19, I left Poland, and I started living in London, I actually got to an art school in London because I was always painting. I was always a painter, and I wanted to study art. But then my boyfriend from Poland visited, and I got pregnant, and I had my daughter in spite of all kinds of, in spite of the fact that my mother never agreed to it. And relationship with my boyfriend didn't work out. Eventually, I was left with in a situation where it's a little complicated to describe. So I have it all in my book, also described in a short way, so it's easy to get through it. But the thing is that it was a very, very difficult time for me because I couldn't be with my daughter.
Right. Can I just from reading the book and reading your story, first of all, it's just absolutely amazing what you've been through, living in Poland and going through what you went through, and in your mother's history as well, going through the wars and different things, which really shapes people.
Yes.
And knowing that you had this actress in you, this performer, this artist in you that was not ever allowed to become who you were. And yet you went out into London and you took this risk and you became, you did whatever it took to become who you are today, really, but who you felt like you were at the moment, right? So your search is pretty amazing.
Well, I always knew that if I am not going to look for my fulfillment and happiness in life, the life of my child is also not going to be fulfilled and happy, because my daughter would rather have me, even if we were apart, she'd rather have me happy realizing myself, and that would be for her a model of behavior instead of being unhappy and taking advice from people who had their very strong opinions and views, and I was connecting to them, like my mother and the father of my daughter. I had strong connection, emotional connection with them, but I couldn't let go of going my way and looking for a way to realize myself.
Yeah.
And it was well, I was on my own for I had no very close relationships like I had with my mother and the father of my daughter for a very long time. So I was by myself, and it was just painting. It was just painting and painting and painting.
Yeah. So can you share, because one thing that sticks out to me in the power of that story is that when you did give yourself that creative license and you started painting, you had your first experience.
Right. Actually, when I was 16, I had a first experience that was very out of this world. I was trying to learn about philosophy. I went to the library in Warsaw when I still lived in Poland, and I picked up. I was actually, that was a person in the library advised me to get the book about Indian philosophy, because that was the oldest account of philosophy in the world. And I started looking through it, and I couldn't understand much. It was a very dry academic language, and I wasn't really into that kind of learning. I wanted to understand something, and it wasn't working until I saw some poems written about, it was Vedas, and I started reading that, and I read something about Atman and Brahman, which is, Atman is the individual soul, and Brahman is everything. is the creator of everything. And reading that, I had this incredible experience of lifting up and flying, and I literally experienced phenomena that were completely impossible to understand. So that was the first time when something like that happened. And then in Los Angeles, that was 1988, when I was in Los Angeles, I also had an incredible experience of working on a painting, and suddenly the painting became something else, and I was in another dimension that was clear that I was not anymore in the reality that we normally in, but it was something else. So I write about that too. And then few years after that, I had my experience, which I beforehand I didn't know anything about. And my book has a title, subtitle, "The Power of Kundalini Rising and Spiritual Enlightenment." And I didn't know anything about Kundalini at that time. I didn't know what it was. And when I write about chakras, that's because later, the next year after my experience, I was able to connect it with what's already known on the subject. But the experience happened when I was suicidal. I came to the point in my life when I realized I had not been able to live with my daughter for many years. She was growing up without me. And I was never able to, in Los Angeles, because in Europe I was doing okay with my artwork. Actually, I was doing quite well. And then when I ended up in LA, I had this completely new way of working on my art, and I worked on that abstract art for 4 years. And it was very hard for me to actually make money with it, even though I knew what it was. I knew how important it was, to me at least, what a breakthrough it was in my artwork. But I wasn't able, even with shows, I wasn't able to really survive well enough to be able to have my daughter with me. So after a while, I just got very depressed, and I was suicidal. And the process when I was trying to stop myself from ending my life, that's when the experience began. And that's when I, at first, was trying to stop my sense of total depression and loss. And I was able to bring myself to a neutral emotional state. And this is something that's very important for everybody who is dealing with any kind of emotional overwhelm, that there is a way of overcoming it. And I discovered that way is something that for thousands of years people have already talked about, and that's the essence of meditation. But meditation which starts with acknowledging the emotion. So what I did, I acknowledged what my emotion was, and I called it something. I called it depression, and I didn't want to be there. So I learned at that point how to move it away from me. And this is something what I practiced subconsciously for years, to be able to paint in any emotional state. And although this is something that maybe not everybody is an artist, but everybody is going through all kinds of emotional states. So when I was going through that terrible depression, I was able to move it away. And at that point, I would find myself in that neutral space, not a happy space, not unhappy space, but neutral. And in fact, there is a space like that that has no emotion. And that allows the energy to transcend. And so the whole experience that happened afterwards, once I was able to bring my emotions to the neutral place, I also, which I had no idea that it could happen, I also at that time was able to conquer my mind. And that's another thing that is known from meditation practices, and something that is hard to do, but it happens. And it can happen if we do certain practices. I was doing them subconsciously, but eventually this incredible thing happened, which was that the energy from the second chakra, which is the emotional chakra, the dimensions of emotions, was able to move up. And now I should probably describe the basics of the experience, because the experience was something that I didn't know anything about it when it happened. But once it was over, I knew what happened, but I had no words for it. It took time to look for words, and I also had a couple of incredible experiences afterwards, especially one when I found in a bookstore an image, a picture of a person who I didn't know anything about. I never had a spiritual teacher, and I never practiced yoga before that, and I never practiced meditation. I just did my artwork and focused on that. So I was able to see in somebody's eyes that he had that same experience, and that confirmed my experience and allowed me to look into resources about Kundalini rising and spiritual enlightenment. So after I looked into the subtle body, how the subtle body is, the system of the subtle body, which I have a picture of in the back of my book. And I also have a picture over here because that's the same image. I realized that my experience was exactly what Kundalini rising resulting in spiritual enlightenment is. Only I understood, I saw the energy centers, which are called chakras, as dimensions of perception. So during my experience, I was suddenly finding myself in those worlds, in those realms, which I was able to explore. The first realm was the neutral space, neutral emotional space. Once that was established, I was able to, after a while, because at first I was really scared. I really got scared when I suddenly saw this incredible rainbow light, rainbow rope of light moving. That was after I decided to commit suicide. That was when I was ready to get up and kill myself. And there was no doubt, I had no doubt. I couldn't figure out how not to do it. So I saw that light, and it scared me terribly, because it was supernatural. It was real, and yet it was magical. And I've never heard about anything like that before. And there was this beautiful rope of rainbow light flowing in front of me, and it seemed like it was coming out of me. And I got so terrified that I wanted to run away, and I started to run away, but it was moving with me. Then I knew it was in me, and it was a part of me. So I had these two options: to scream and run away and freak out, and just, I was in the bathroom. I was in the bathtub, actually. So I had that option of completely freak out and run out into the hall and scream, or I could just agree to stay and wait what happens. So I agreed to experience. I agreed to stay, and I said to myself, no matter what happens, I'm going to be there. I'm going to watch it. I'm here to listen. I'm here to watch. I'm here, whatever it is, let it be.
So that was your free will saying yes.
Well, yeah, that was the choice between acting on your fear and acting on being with it, and not being afraid. So I had to I basically conquered my fear at that time. And that's when the incredible, phenomenal thing that had other stages started to happen. And at first, I saw my life, all of the images that were just from my life when I was a little child. At first, I saw a child. I didn't even know who that child was. I was watching myself from a certain distance, from above and from away. And there was this little child. I couldn't even tell if it was a girl or a boy, but I realized the child was going through some kind of decisions. The child was making decisions and thinking and reacting to situations. And then I realized that those situations are what I lived through. This is my life. And that's when all of my thoughts, from the beginning of the time when I started thinking, they were coming up one after another, and I was able to follow them. It's not something that we normally experience. Right?
Right.
So all the thoughts that I had in my life, I was able to follow, which sounds unreal, but that's what really happened. And eventually I was able to, I describe it more precisely in the book, of course. I was able to see that each of the thoughts from the past was coming up to the present time, and then it was vanishing. It disappeared. But the energy from them stayed. And that's the next level of transcendence, when my energy from the mind energy, what we have, all the thoughts, all that we think, who we think we are, all that we're dealing with in life, all that came up to the present time, which is like the surface. It's like bubbles of oxygen going up to the surface in the water, and disappeared. So at some point, I was there. I had no thoughts. They were all done. And if new ones were coming up, the same thing would happen. They would come to a perfect conclusion. And I realized that our mind, not just mine, but everybody's mind, is able to release all the thoughts and start clean and analyze perfectly. This is the analytical mind that we have. And this is what we mostly think all there is to our mind. Mm-hmm. But the mind is mind is better than any computer. And it can think perfectly. And I knew that that's the stage I'm in. Later, there was this sense of great happiness. I was elated, and I started even levitating. And the next stage happened. The next stage was about love, and that's when the fourth chakra was open. I write clearly about that. I write about it in detail, and that's when in this stage of this experience, you realize that love is there all the time for everybody. And this is what you're teaching, Tamra, and this is where I was so happy to meet you, because that's exactly what it is. Love is there. You just have to open yourself up to it. You can have it all the time. It's there. It is a dimension of perception. And these dimensions are there for us, only they're not working like our mind is in a linear fashion. Mm-hmm. They are there, and through certain practices, and basically through cultivation of the upper chakras, because the fourth one is the first of the upper chakras, upper dimensions. If we cultivate them, we can reach incredible levels of consciousness that will make our life so much more than what we think it is, more than we can imagine. There were, after the fourth chakra was the time when I realized that I'm loved. That I'm loved, even though there was no human around me. I was loved, and we all are. We all are loved just like we want, because love is something that's there, and it doesn't depend on time or space. It's a dimension that's always there. It's eternal. The fifth and sixth chakra are about connection and communication. And that's when I actually had some figures come to me. The music was incredible. I thought I was still in the bathtub. And I was thinking that people are playing music really loud during the day in the house. I was renting a room in this big old Victorian mansion, and the house was always empty at that time. It was about 2:30 in the afternoon. And suddenly I hear this music. And that's the fifth chakra opening. This is where we experience other beings that come and help, and they're there all the time too. These beings are there, and some of there are books and experiences that people had of channeling and of channeling other beings and being helped by other beings. So just like the fourth chakra, the fourth dimension, and the fifth dimension, there are beings there that are ready to help anytime. We just have to tap into that dimension. And there are ways to do it. There are ways to cultivate the fifth chakra through the sound, and mainly through the sound, but also through other techniques. But sixth chakra is very important. That was the dimension when I saw a vision which at first I couldn't understand. But then I realized what it was. And actually, even one of my friends here locally in Reno had the same experience. He saw the same thing, and he knew what it was too. And it was the matrix of creation. At that point, you realize and you know that it's true that our life is already being designed. And this is something that is a big deal to really understand, because it seems like it's going back to some superstition or something, but no. In that dimension of perception, you can learn that we are already, everything that we're going through has already happened. It has happened in that very dimension. It's been designed. So, well, it's maybe seems like not a very good thing, because what are we doing if it's already all done, right? But actually, that's only a next step to the next stage of Kundalini travel. And let me just say now that before I go further into the second stage of the sixth dimension and into the seventh one, that who is going through all that? So I
was going to ask you if you could answer that question for us, because, you know, the belief that you have in the fifth and that everything is already destined or designed, right? I don't want to believe that, actually. Right. I want to believe that I'm a co-creator with my experience, and we are based on choice, right?
Right.
Yeah, there's a blueprint, is what you're saying, right? And so let's, because there's a lot of people probably listening to this that are going to go, what is she saying?
Yes.
So, because that is a big consciousness question. Am I creating it, or did it already get created, and am I just kind of paddling along in my life? Okay. So speak to that.
Yes, I can explain that. Okay. So, as I mentioned earlier, my book subtitle is The Power of Kundalini Rising. And Kundalini, I picked that word because no other word was better. And in old India, in Sanskrit, it means the coiled up. And Kundalini is our individual unit of consciousness. And when I saw the rainbow light flowing in the form of a serpent, that was the Kundalini that we all have. This is the individual unit of consciousness. This is who you are. You are your individual unit of consciousness. And you're there, but your form is like there is no form to it. We only experience different worlds through our chakras, which are dimensions of perception. So in each world exists on different principles. The material world that we experience is just the material world. We belong to it with our bodies. But the essence of our being is usually, in most cases, in 98% of people always, we have it asleep at the bottom of the spine. And when it wakes up, it travels through those different worlds. And each world is telling us something new, something different. That's why in the realm of the sixth chakra, you can learn about the fact that time doesn't exist. It's just a concept that belongs to the third dimension of mind, and that there is a design where everybody has their life already there. You are already there. You're already realized, but we don't know it. We don't know it, especially if we are only living in the first three chakras. We don't know it. So for me, it was a very, also kind of like, well, I don't really like this. I don't really like the fact that I'm already designed, and what now, right? But that's just the stage. The next stage of that Kundalini energy traveling up. Kundalini, which is individual unit of consciousness. Experiencing this adventure of going up the spine and entering and exploring each of the dimensions. At the point when it's exploring the sixth dimension, the dimension of intuition and third eye, right? So that's the intuition and vision. The vision that I had was the matrix of creation, but right after that, something else happened. Something else that is very difficult to describe. This is when the soul self-realizes. This is the moment of self-realization, because soul exists beyond time and space. And soul is who you are deep inside. But you have to realize your soul and know that everything that you're going through, you created yourself. You created that because soul has a purpose of going through these experiences in order to self-realize. So when you become conscious of being an eternal soul, that's when you know that, okay, this is not what I thought I was, right? I was not the mind. I was not the body. I was not the emotions. I was not the mind. I am an eternal being. Okay, so that's the top of the sixth chakra. And now the last part of it is something that I have to, again, go back to the third chakra, to the third dimension, when our mind is trying to figure out what's going on. Who am I? What am I doing? Why am I doing this? And all that. What are my plans? What am I gonna do? How am I gonna deal with this problem or that problem? This is the self-knowing. This is the first part of something that's called self-inquiry. And without self-inquiry, the seventh chakra, the pure, I call it pure intellect. It could be called witness. This is the discerning witness that we are. But in order to get to that point of being able to use self-inquiry, we have to first know about ourselves. Who are we? And it's simple. The part, know thyself, is simple. Just know who you are without having any misconceptions given you by anybody and anything. So who am I? I am this person who I'm an artist, okay? That's what I always tell myself. I'm an artist. I have a daughter. I like to ski. These things. These are basic things. Who are we? And these things bring us to later, after some time of actually figuring out who we are independently from anything that anybody else can tell us, whether we are good or bad, whether we're going to get a job or not going to get a job. That self-understanding is the first part of self-inquiry. Self-inquiry is a philosophical study of our own being. And we're not taught that in school. And that's why it's hard for many of us to even get to that point of self-inquiry. I was very inclined to understand life philosophically. I didn't know where it would lead me, of course, but I always was curious about what is actually making this whole thing work. And why is it so, why sometimes I feel love, other times I don't? Why sometimes life is good, other times it's bad? Why can I realize some of my goals and not realize the others? Well, this philosophical thought that we have to plant in ourselves, this meditation that becomes self-inquiry, is a system of asking questions and getting answers. Before the Kundalini energy can go through the crown chakra, we have to ask certain questions. And this is the most magical thing also about the whole experience. It does happen by itself, but we ask questions all along. All along as it was happening to me, I was asking questions. I was simply asking questions. When I saw the vision and I didn't know what it was, I simply asked the question, what is it? And then I was able to, because I was already out, I wasn't out of my body, but I was visiting that dimension where I could move incredible distances. And I was hovering over that matrix of creation. And I found what it was. I realized what it was and where I was in that matrix of creation. I found my little place. Then the soul came on and made me realize that, I'm much bigger than anything that I thought about. Artist, that's nothing. Each of us is an incredible being. Magical being. We can do so much. We can do anything we want. At that point, when I knew that the soul that I was so powerful, I still had this one question. Where does the soul get the energy from? And I got an answer. And I'm not going to say what that answer is. I'll keep it secret until you get my book. Because it's very important to read from the beginning to the end. It's not a long book. It's only 189 pages.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Here it is, everyone. Yep.
Because this last part of the experience is pure self-inquiry. And when the soul asks the question and the answer comes, the answer came, and I got it. And as I got it, I became it. That's how close my inquiry was to the truth. And once I became it, the seventh chakra opened up. And once that happens, I couldn't ask any more questions. There was no more questions, but there was something else. There was light, just light. The light and the consciousness is all there is. And that's when I was able to see through. Actually, I was able to see through all of the lower dimensions, all of the lower chakras, as I was already a self-realized soul. Then the space of being united with everything is just the experience of knowing that you are the creator, that you create everything that's around. And you are not anymore that little person that we think we are, because we are so overwhelmed by the whole physical and emotional and mental reality. But that's just because we are dominated by the ego, which is the domination of the first three dimensions. Once the energy, the Kundalini individual unit of consciousness, breaks through all these chakras along the spine and exits through the crown chakra, we are united with everything. And there's no time to it. It's forever.
It's forever. It's endless. So beautiful. I could listen to you forever. And I have a few questions, so for our listeners. So if they want to try to have this experience, is that possible in your experience?
Yes, it is possible. Everybody can, everyone can have the experience. When it's a matter of predispositions, maybe, and I write about that in the book, because some of us have glimpses of other worlds. Sometimes we're afraid of it. Sometimes we are really happy to get that glimpse, to experience the message from somewhere. Sometimes intuition is giving us great answers. Sometimes our heart opens up and we feel incredibly wonderful, and we know that we are loved and the love is there, and other times we don't. What I suggest to everyone who would like to experience the fullness of being is to practice by training the first three chakras and cultivating the 4 upper chakras. And we already are introduced into the training of the lower chakras by yoga, which is physical activity that actually makes our first chakra, the first dimension, less dense, and we can stretch much better, and we can experience opening of the upper chakras as well. But any physical activity, any sport is very good. So we're already there as humanity. We have already moved forward. I mean, I remember my parents, it was like, what, you working out? That's not what they knew, right? Nobody knew about working out. So we are really ahead with that. We already working out. We already know that exercise is very good. The second thing is the emotional control. Not a control of denying the emotions, but the control of acknowledging them and being able to separate ourselves from them and achieving the neutral space. The third part is to train the mind, and the mind needs to be trained just by, I was saying earlier, meditation and focusing of the mind. Focusing, there can be many ways. It depends on your own predispositions. What is the best way for you to focus your mind? But focusing is just excellent. Whatever you do, if you focus your mind, if you're able to focus your mind better, you'll do better with everything, right? I mean, that's the thing. And it doesn't have to be anything difficult, but it can be just a practicing of even looking at one point. This is very known, looking at one point. Mm-hmm. And I think it's called Bindu. That one point that everything is in there. The cosmos is in that little point, but it's just looking in that little point. And ways of focusing mind are many. It's generally just that helps, because the mind can do much more than we are, it's much more able than the way we are using it.
Can I ask you a question about this? Because knowing what you know, and then you walk about in the world and you see people really suffering in the battle with their mind and the belief systems and the perspectives, if you will. And yet I feel like there's this leap coming where people are just going to go, oh my gosh, I get it. And they're going to, like in your Kundalini rising experience, you're going to let go. The bubbles rise up and they just fall away.
Yes.
Because I really get a sense that this is like going to come in bigger waves of people. Do you?
Yes, definitely. Yeah. I mean, even my experience of it, though it happens in 1992, it was already at the beginning of that wave of spiritual consciousness expansion, and many more and more people have the ability to tap into the upper dimensions, upper chakras, and they're learning from them, and they're learning that the mind is not all, that there is much more, that we are much more than the mind itself. So that's also, of course, education about that is very important. It's important to know that we are multidimensional beings, and that if we are oppressed by our own mind, we can work towards eliminating that oppression. Mm-hmm. And it depends on a lot on the understanding of the chakras and the whole system, because this is a subtle body system which we are not taught in schools. Right. And I hope there will come a day soon when children will be taught in schools that they're not just the body, but they are an eternal, incredible being of multidimensional being. There are even more dimensions, more chakras than just the 7. Mm-hmm. But for understanding of who we are and how to transcend those dimensions and unite with everything that is, and understand how incredible we are and how we're co-creating our reality, for that one needs to really not only know but also practice. There is practice. So that's why yoga and meditation are excellent. Excellent, and we can access it. We can access that pretty much everywhere now. In maybe not everywhere in the world, but everywhere in the United States or Canada, you can find places where you can learn about meditation and start practicing it. And I know that many of us already do. Yeah. And the upper chakras is just cultivation of them. So learning how to open up to that. And with that, the chance of having the experience is much better. Because what happened to me spontaneously, I didn't know anything about it before, but I practiced it by myself with my intuition. My intuition was telling me that I have to paint and I have to stare at the painting. And I was staring and thinking, I'm crazy to do that. But then suddenly it brought results. And that's how it is. Especially the mind is the most difficult thing to conquer. It's very, very difficult to conquer the mind.
Yeah, it is a runaway train. And then I think too that, you're using, you're talking about the Kundalini experience and chakras, which is very much of an Eastern Indian belief system.
Right.
And that there are other belief systems that in all of history parallel this. They are just different stories and different processes and different energy fields around the body and those kinds of things.
Right.
So I want to just encourage everyone to look for if this is what you want in your life, or maybe you've already had it, that you're looking for a version that really fits you, and that this beautiful explanation that you've just given gives you a roadmap to what the experience of enlightenment really is. And, there was a time in my life I thought that enlightenment meant that I was going to physically poof out. I was going to physically lose my body. And then when I found out that wasn't true, and that it's that we can have this inside the body walking around in our lives right now, it's pretty amazing. How has this, before we close, how has this, do you feel, changed your life, changed your art, changed your relationships?
It became a new life, but you are still kind of the same person, right? You're still you. You're still that individual unit of consciousness that has all these individual characteristics, right? But at the same time, because Kundalini goes through your whole body and opens up all these worlds, it clears the energy, so you don't have any more energy stuck anywhere. And if it happens that you have a situation that's difficult, a problem, I mean, this is just the nature of our life. The problems are not going to go away. The ones that are coming, they're coming, but you don't deal with them in the way like you would have before. Like before, I'd go, oh my God, no. I can say now, well, that's interesting.
That's a good one. Yeah.
That's a good one. Okay, well, what's next? You don't have to just be completely overwhelmed and not know and feel unhappy about it, right? And happiness doesn't have to be. You don't have to be unhappy. You don't have to be. If something terrible happens, bad things happen, and people, close relationships fall apart, or people die. It's accidents. Okay, well, yes, it does, but you are an eternal being that's going through this, and no more that energy of bad emotion it doesn't stay with you for a long
Right.
time.
Rolls off your,
It
yeah.
just, it goes through you. You experience things in the same way. I mean, you experience things deeply, maybe even more than before, because you're open to experiences. And about a year and a half or 2 years after the experience, throughout that whole time, I was so hypersensitive and I was so psychic that anybody who came up to me, I would know everything, what they thought, what they're thinking, I would know what they're feeling. And after a while, you know, if you don't protect yourself from the invasion of all that, you know, it's really much. But with time, it kind of balanced out, and now for me myself, it's I just don't know how to be unhappy.
Yeah.
Something like
I
that.
love that. Yeah.
I just don't
Yeah.
know.
I get it. I
Yeah.
do. Yeah. It's, and I, you know, it's sometimes challenging. You have a beautiful way of describing your process. It's sometimes challenging to get this across because there really aren't words for this. You know, it's like when I was in my Bliss experience, the words, the only words I could come up with were, everyone needs to know this. And I just sat and wept, just not, you know, just love tears, just like, oh my gosh. And, you know, everyone does need to know this. And so I just have faith in our humanity that whoever's listening to this right now and is going to get your book and go on the journey with you and open up those doors for themselves. You know, just sometimes it takes one book to turn the corner for you to know that it's possible. And I think that what you've done is explained, you had a very challenging life growing up. You were at the absolute doorstep of suicide and you had this awakening. So those are a lot of big parts of someone's life that say, if you can do it, anyone can do it. It's all of who we are. And it's just a beautiful expression. So I want to thank you, my darling. Do you have any final words you'd like to share with the audience here?
Well, I think what I would like to share is that whether you believe in it or not, it's not a matter of a belief. This is the true state of being. And you can reach it step by step. And at some point, everything comes together. But on the way, all the steps are leading towards better and better life. So whatever state you are in your life, whether you have different beliefs or whether you have a problem with accepting something as truth, maybe some of what I said, step by step, try those practices and see how your life around you, how things fall in places, how things become helpful to you more and more instead of being against you.
Beautiful, beautiful. What I'm going to do now is share the screen so they can see your website, which is where you would go to click and order the book. So hang on, everyone. So this is Monique's website, and it is Monique, MOINQUE, Rebelle, REBELLE.com. And I will include that with this video, but just so that you know, this is how it looks. And you can click on the link here and order the book. So my darling, thank you so much for sharing this incredible in-depth journey of who you are. And now, are you a full-time practicing artist now and author?
Yes, I am. Not working on any shows right now. I have a show of my work right now in Reno, but because of my book, I've been doing more of interviews and sessions with people, and I'm working on an online program to let people have take it in their own time and learn the process and learn how to train the lower chakras and how to develop the upper ones.
Beautiful. Well, you know, the invitation is open for you to appear as an Upswing U instructor and helping people enlighten, if that's what you choose to do. So we'll be excited to see if that transpires this year. And I have adored this time. This has been so soul fulfilling to listen to you and hear your journey. And we've talked so many times on Facebook Messenger, but never face to face. So what a delight. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tamra.
All right. All right, everyone. Thank you so much. And let us know how you enjoy this interview and let us know if you have questions. All right. Bye for now.
Bye.